What happens when you know something's wrong with you, but nobody believes you? In this episode, we talk about the emotional cost of being a medical mystery and why getting a diagnosis can take years. Plus, I'm joined by author and advocate Tilly Rose, who pulls back the curtain on the healthcare system and what patients endure just to be heard. Welcome back to a new season of The Spoonful Show. You're listening to The Spoonful Show, honest conversations about chronic illness, identity, and finding meaning, even when life changes everything. I'm Rachel, a chronic illness spoonie, and I'm really glad you're here. Let's get started. I am so excited for the new season of Spoonful Show to introduce my co-host today, Tilly Rose. Tilly is an author and activist championing access to higher education and patient advocacy. After 20 years as a patient, Tilly made the decision to share her journey on Instagram and share firsthand how her experience resonated with her followers. She now shares her personal story in chapters on That Tilly Rose to her community of over 100,000. Tilly has recently started working with the NHS, global medical organizations, and charities to give patients a voice. Tilly's book, Be Patient, was released last year, and a paperback version was released on January 29th. We all will be patients at some point in our lives, and Be Patient is a part of her wider mission to impact patient care. Tilly was on our podcast on episode 57, talking about her life. So I would recommend going back and listening to that episode. So Tilly, thank you so much. On the first episode of the new season, I couldn't think of anyone better to come and join me and be my co-host for the episode.
Well, Rachel, I am very excited to be here. And as you say, yes, I very much enjoyed recording the episode with you earlier in the year, which we were just chatting about before the show and saying how at the time I recorded it and subsequently ended up in another medical emergency. And the episode was released whilst I was in hospital. But it was such a boost to actually see that this horrible patient experience was going into something good. And that's what I feel about the podcast as well, supporting so many people with chronic illnesses. So I'm, very much looking forward to chatting to you more today on some different topics.
Yes. Today we're going to talk about the cost of being a medical mystery. And you and I both been in that space. Before we dive in, though, let's have you update us on the things that have been going on. You were here in May of 2025. So update us. You have a lot to update, some good news and some exciting things that have been going on.
Yeah, I like to think that this is a story of hope, because at moments along the journey, it certainly felt like the journey was going to end. And at moments, as I'm sure lots of patients have experienced, it felt utterly futile, like nothing was ever going to change. And I had a little window, as I remember when I recorded your podcast, where I wasn't in hospital, but I was still in Germany, undergoing what had been by this stage almost 18 months of medical care. I'd gone over there for 3 weeks initially for a life-saving operation. And it turned out that my condition, which was these vascular compressions, had caused so many problems in my body that had remained undetected for years. And thankfully, which I will forever be grateful for, I found a medical team in Germany who kept pursuing each stage of this medical mystery. And to update you on where I sort of was post-podcast, I subsequently ended up in 2 German hospitals after recording with you. And what they ended up finding was that, as well as having this buildup of toxins and heavy metals in my body as a result of my blood flow to my kidneys not working for years, I'd also developed a whole host of chronic infections and bacteria and viruses in my system that had just had the perfect environment to fester whilst everything was stuck inside of me. And I ended up undergoing intense IV antibiotic treatment. And it brought me back to life. I went from a girl who couldn't move out of the bed with muscles spasming, drenched in sweat, muscles locking. As I said to you just before, Rachel, I was unable to even move out of the bed to go to the bathroom. It was, the impact on my life was huge, and I was living in a hospital. But this treatment turned out to be, I view as a miracle, because I say miracles don't always just happen overnight. But
Mhm.
the end result was being able to return to England with my mom after over 18 months in Germany, and to begin to start doing a lot of the things that I'd manifested from that hospital bed. I called it the summer of love because so many of my friends were getting married in the summer, and I made it to the weddings, which I'm sure you'll appreciate, Rachel. Like, you miss out on so many things as a result of chronic
Mhm.
illness, and have to turn down so many lovely opportunities. And it never gets easier the more you turn down. And I think people sometimes say, "Oh, you're kind of used to it now," but you never get used to missing out on these things. It's not fair. And suddenly, I was able to do them, and that was incredible. And then the summer ended with the ultimate romance, where I got engaged, which was
Wow.
also a really beautiful moment. And I'd always said to my partner that I didn't want to get engaged when I was this ill. I wanted to be able to enjoy my engagement. And
Mhm.
we went away together to Italy for the first time abroad in 10 years, on a holiday, just the two of us. And yeah, it was so special. And I did manage to enjoy my engagement. So it's a story of hope. Things still are by no means perfect. I'm still navigating the treatment for these infections, navigating the immune responses, and patient life is definitely still there. But you've got to hold on to the wins, and there have been a lot of wins recently. So that's keeping me going.
Oh my gosh, so exciting. It's so exciting. And I saw all your posts about your engagement. It looks so beautiful. So,
It was so thoughtful. Yeah.
yeah.
We met at university, and there was a tradition at our uni where it was called college married and freshers week. So you just be paired up with someone, basically. And the tradition was, the following year you're given college children as a sort of buddy
Mhm.
system for the new students coming in. And yeah, my now fiance, my boyfriend at the time, he got down on one knee in Freshers Week with a Haribo ring and proposed. So
Oh,
he whacked out a Haribo ring at the actual engagement as well, which was a very cute moment.
oh, that's so, I love that. I
Yeah,
love
it
that.
was very sweet.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Well, being a medical mystery, it sounds intriguing from the outside, but like you and I have both experienced um the years of pain, fear, confusion, just the emotional roller
Yeah,
coaster.
absolutely.
Um you How long from first symptoms to like diagnosis? I mean, you've been dealing with this for 20 years. So
Yeah.
walk us through, like, how long were you in that space of not knowing what was going on?
It was a really long journey, and along the way there were different diagnoses. So, for instance, to start with, it was 13 years of from the age of 10, trying to navigate um, symptoms that nobody could explain, that culminated finally in a diagnosis of, at the time, undiagnosed active tuberculosis, which you would think would have been picked up so much earlier, that I
Mhm.
underwent treatment for. And I then subsequently had another patch in my life where my life transformed after the TB treatment. And I thought, I've got my life back. This is incredible. But then again, symptoms started to emerge, strange symptoms that didn't fit into any sort of textbook, which was often what the doctors are looking for. That then culminated in a diagnosis of Addison's disease, which was only found when I went into what is a life threatening adrenal crisis. And that, just to put it in context, was directly related to both the tuberculosis and then one of my subsequent diagnoses. So it was all sort of a domino effect. All of these, it
Mhm.
wasn't I had all these separate weird conditions. It was very much a domino effect on my body. And then finally, as you say, 20 years on, they found that I had these vascular compressions, which basically mean the blood vessels in your body have become squashed and the blood isn't flowing to vital organs. And it eventually turned out that I'd been born with hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which means you're bendy, basically. And that's how it was framed to me when I was a teenager. They said, you're just bendy. And they didn't make it account for anything else that could be happening in my body. But I've subsequently learned that you can be bendy on the outside and you can also be bendy on the inside. So these vascular compressions that developed in my body that remained undetected were directly as a result of my connective tissue being too stretchy. And I'm seeing more and more now, and I've so many EDS patients who are living really challenging lives. And whilst, there might not be one ultimate cure, what I say is, if you look into things like these vascular compressions, there are ways to improve your quality of life. And for me, having that operation, it was life-saving and also life-changing. So, but along the way, like you, Rachel, it was years and years of battling to get those answers. And I know, I don't know what the kind of comparison would be in the US in terms of healthcare systems, but did you find that you were sort of passed from ologist to ologist through different departments on that journey?
My experience was more of, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 21, which is actually kind of old for type 1 diabetes. Usually that's, in 7, 8, 9 years old. So when I started having symptoms, it was kind of placed on it's your diabetes. So my first MS symptoms were numbness in my feet that within a few hours had gone up to my knees, and went into the hospital. And so I found that not only with the MS diagnosis, but also with what I'm trying to diagnose now, there's a lot of blame on it's your diabetes, even though it was under control.
Yeah. They could say, you've got peripheral neuropathy, diabetes has caused it. It's not something new. Yeah. And you were thinking this was a new symptom that had developed.
Right. Yeah. And especially with diabetes, you have to be in control of your blood sugars. And so I was like, this doesn't seem right. Like my blood sugars are in control. Everything is good. It shouldn't be producing this. And then so that was a 6-year journey to get the MS diagnosis. And it was just a lot of things coming out okay. Your test results are coming out okay. And with MS, which a lot of people may experience with other illnesses, is they almost had to wait to diagnose it. With MS, the rule book is you have to have at least 2 flare-ups within a year's time. And all of these, so it's a horrible feeling to feel like you're waiting for me to get worse before you can treat me. And so that's what I experienced, is almost like them just pushing it into a diagnosis. So what I'm dealing with now, they're saying, at first they were like, it's not MS, but we don't know what it is. And just kind of throwing their hands up. And it took me last summer to really start advocating and finding the doctors that would do more testing. And
I can really relate to that with my Addison's disease. The treatment is steroid medication. And prior to having my vascular compression surgery, everything was blamed on the Addisons. So every time I turned up at A&E, it was a case of, we'll just shove a load of IV steroid into her and sticking plaster. And steroid makes everyone feel better, right? It calms things down. But then they just send me home, and I'd say, can we investigate why this keeps happening, or why I keep having a crisis? And the why, or the other symptoms, were just like you, kind of placed in the Addison's bracket, even though I was certain there was something else really wrong that was going on. And I think it's really interesting what you said about the test results coming back normal and then repeating that line. And it's a line that I find so many of my followers and myself, you have this perception, I think, if you're not a patient, that that's a good thing. But when you are so ill, and you are so ill, normal doesn't help. Normal doesn't give a sense of direction, a pathway. So actually you end up sort of in a way praying for something to come back that gives a clue on the medical detective journey. And sadly, that's something that is abnormal. So when
Mhm.
doctors say it's great news after years of searching and years of being ill, actually, it doesn't feel like great news in my experience.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Um, sorry, this is my MS brain. Um, I was talking with somebody the other day about that feeling of when you get the diagnosis of feeling relief. And,
Yeah.
because for my MS diagnosis, I went probably the last year of them saying it's probably MS, but we're just not ready yet. We're not ready yet.
And that
And
uncertainty, to live with that uncertainty is a horrible feeling. Really
yeah,
horrible.
yeah. And so to go from really feeling like this is what it is and then getting that diagnosis and feeling like, okay, this is something that I can take medicine for, I can start treating,
Mm.
but also realizing MS is a lifelong progressive disease. And so why am I happy that we're at
Yeah.
this place?
Which is
But
really frightening. It's a
yeah.
strange, I think a lot of patients find that it's a strange mixture of emotions. When I went to Germany and got the vascular compression diagnosis, I was in the scan, and it was a moment I'll never forget when the professor found what sort of he was looking for and what he thought he was going to find, but we didn't know. And we traveled over there. I I let out a scream. That is how much this moment meant to me, because I'd been told palliative care, comfort care in the UK, nobody was pursuing it, nobody was helping me. And that sense of, okay, I've now got a label, and a
Mm-hmm.
label means we can work with this. But you're right, it was a moment of sort of pure, I guess, joy in a way, joy and relief that finally I had something that I could work with. But then when you come away and you start to reflect on it, like you with the
Mm-hmm.
MS diagnosis, you then also have to deal with the realization that actually there's no quick fix here. I was going to have open abdominal surgery, which was extremely dangerous, could lead to, massive blood loss, which ended up happening, blood transfusions. And what was to come was likely going to be a horror show. But I still felt relief. And I was still pleased that I had a label, because it meant there was a route. And I think without a pathway, when you're just at home trying to deal with these symptoms, and I don't know how, again, it'd be interesting to hear what your experience in America is, but I find that if you don't have a label, you also don't get the support with the symptoms. So
Mm-hmm.
the kind of the pain relief, the anti-sickness, all those sorts of things that may help you seem to become available once you're under the right department with that label. But often in the UK, without that, you're
Mm-hmm.
fighting, you're on your own. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just kind of a wait and see of let's
Yeah.
just see if this continues. And that's
Mm.
so frustrating.
Yeah, that's, yeah, really, really difficult to manage and deal with. Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that don't have a diagnosis yet, what are some ways, like advocacy wise, that helped kind of get you to a diagnosis? Because I feel like when it's that first diagnosis, I feel like now we're pros. You and
Yeah,
I,
we're the expert
we're
patients.
experts on
I
being a
say the
patient.
expert,
And
the expert
yeah,
no one wants to be. It's
that's
not what
right.
we dream of being, but we are, and we're in this
Yeah,
position. So yeah, we've got to share the knowledge now.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But for someone, I feel for the people that are going into this kind of blindly,
Yeah.
and walk us through like any sort of tips as far as things that you did that kind of helped speed things along a little bit.
No, I completely agree with you. When I look back at this journey, I think I don't almost appreciate how much I have learned along the way. And it's only sometimes when you talk to people who are much earlier in their journey that you realize, God, the amount of research we've done, the things we've learned, the way we approach doctors. And for me, it's very much been a team effort. My mum has been unbelievable on this journey, and I've been so lucky to have an advocate constantly by my side. And I know that, yeah, that's a very privileged position to be in, and not everybody has that. But if there is, I think, anybody in your life who you can talk to about this, who can give you a perspective on it, who really knows you, I think that's really important, because you can end up being sort of I guess in a way, like slightly shut down sometimes by the medical community. And it's important that someone in your life is giving you that honest perspective of what they think is going on, because they're observing you. And if there is anybody who can come to appointments or advocate for you, that is a real, strength that you can add, because sadly, when you're ill, you're not always in a position to advocate for yourself. And that can be anyone in your life. That doesn't have to be a family member. It could be a friend or someone you've, or sometimes in a healthcare setting, someone you've met that's really taken an interest in your case. So yeah, advocacy is really important. And on that same note, the reason that we kept going on this journey and kept ultimately reaching answers was because of our research. And we took my medical case into our own hands, and we realized that ultimately we were the only people who were going to care enough to do this, because this is your life. So if you can, channel that and research, then you always have the next question. So when the doctors say there are no more tests available, or we're going to discharge you, or we're now passing you on to someone else, which happened again and again on my journey. I describe in Be Patient that I'm like the hot potato being passed from ologist to ologist with nobody taking ownership. And so many of those moments could have been, for me, the end of the journey. But because we'd done our research, we always had the next question ready to go. And I don't mean just saying, oh, I'm feeling ill, how can you help me? I mean saying, okay, we've researched various different conditions here. We've realized that this responds to antibiotics. Could it be familial Mediterranean syndrome? Could this be related to cystic fibrosis? Very direct questions, and backed up with evidence that we had. So we had medical papers, reports. So if the doctor said, oh, no, it can't be that, we could then say, oh, but actually, there was an atypical case of this that I've read about. And it meant that we could keep then pursuing the next step. And it meant there was always a plan. So for me, that was one of the biggest things that we did on the journey. And on that same note, I would say that on a kind of more basic level, writing lists before you go to appointments. I don't know whether you do that, Rachel, but I find that when I go into an appointment, you've got that small window. And for a patient, you put so much store by that short appointment, and you want it to be used in the best way possible. So I always have a list of symptoms, questions. And the other thing that I really found, which in recent years more, that I hadn't done prior to this, was I found that showing was more powerful than telling. So I would bring photographs to appointments or videos showing what was happening to my body. So for instance, when my face was swelling, or my skin was burning, or I had rashes on my feet, or my abdomen was growing, rather than just saying, oh, I'm in pain with my head, I was saying, I'm in pain with my head, and look at this picture. You can see I'm in pain with my head because it's swollen, red, it's got lumps on it. And I found that doctors responded, and have in recent years, much more to that. And I think as human beings, we do respond to seeing things. And that can be maybe a more effective way of getting your point across if your illness is in some way giving visible signs.
Mm-hmm. Gosh, I can relate to every single one of those points. I think, having a support person, especially like with my MS, cognitive impairment is normal for me. So I forget things and all of that. But also, there were times where my husband was like, this is what I see of her. Yeah. Like another person validating, what you're experiencing.
And that validates you, I think, and gives you the confidence then as well, doesn't it, to present that, because it's not just you thinking it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was never I wasn't a great advocate for myself until recently. And funny enough, it was right after we interviewed you is when I really started pushing for the diagnosis that I am working on. But I have gotten into that sort of mode that you were talking about researching. Okay, when the test result comes back and I see it before the doctor, I'm researching it and I'm looking for what it could be. Okay, this is normal, but it still could be this and all of those things. And When you had talked about list, I think I mentioned on the podcast a while back, I like to make very detailed list and journals about what I'm experiencing, because the last thing that you want is to go into a doctor's appointment and you say, this part of my back has really been hurting. And they say, well, how long has it been hurting? Well, a while now, well, does it hurt when you lie down or sit up? I'm not so sure, so
And they do
having,
ask, don't they? Those
they
very
do
specific
ask.
questions. And if you just answer generally, I think you're completely right. I don't think you get as far. They want the specifics.
Yeah.
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 And that's really good advice. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And also marking it if you're journaling over time. So you're also, I guess, seeing if something's getting worse or better or fluctuates.
Yeah.
Patterns.
Yeah.
Are you looking for merch that speaks to your truth and makes you laugh? Spoonful of Strength has you covered, literally. From t-shirts and hoodies to mugs and magnets, every design is made for the chronic illness community with heart, humor, and a whole lot of strength. Funny? Check. Inspirational? You bet. Illness specific? Absolutely. And the best part? I can personalize any design or create a custom shirt for you for no extra charge. So whether you're laughing through the pain or wearing your diagnosis with pride, our designs are funny, fierce, and illness specific, because being chronically ill doesn't mean being chronically boring. So if you want a sweatshirt that gets you, head to spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. Now that's spoonful with 2 L's. Use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.
Another, I guess, conversation that I had with my doctors one time. This was with my neurologist, nurse practitioner. I came in with, a bunch of new symptoms. I felt horrible. I was completely feeling like I was in a flare or this or that. And I went through and I said, this is what I'm feeling. And her response to me was, Rachel, you have advanced MS. There are things that I can't help you with. That's just a part of the disease. And I left that appointment completely heartbroken and crying and thinking, so every new symptom that I have is just going to be thrown under this umbrella, and just like, well, what do you want me to do about it? And that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back of going, okay, well then I need to find out what is causing these symptoms.
These are the symptoms, yeah. But also I think in a situation like that, and I can completely relate to that as well. I've been there many times where it's been a case of we can't do anything to help you. And what I found so refreshing when I went to Germany was I found this medical team, and they had a little almost like slogan, I guess, one of the doctors, where he would say, there is always a way, but it won't be the same way for everyone. And it reminded me of my mum's phrase that she always says, there is always something else. And you no doubt came out of that appointment, which I've had so many times, thinking, right, resign. This is my life now. This is my life. I just have to live like this. And I've just found on this journey that actually, one doctor may say that, but I guess a tip for people is you can always seek another opinion. And medicine is opinion a lot of the time. It's backed up by science, but it's also down to the opinion of the individual doctors. And you could no doubt, I don't know whether you've been to anyone subsequently, but sit in front of a different doctor and they'd say, do you know what, Rachel, actually, we can try this, this, and this. Or you may have in your research found then something that you think you could try, that you could be posing to them. And I think, it's important to know you don't just have to take one doctor's words and, believe that or go with that. And if I had one, when I left this London hospital admission in 2022, I went to see a doctor afterwards I was still in a terrible state, to ask, for help. And he sat in front of me and my mum with the desk between us, and he leaned over and he pointed at us and he said, you need to give up and accept this as your life. And again, I think the same feeling that you probably had after that appointment. I came out, I was absolutely crushed. It was a case of like life over. And my mum said, no, he doesn't know us. We're not giving up. And had I given up then, everything that happened subsequently with Germany and my operations and finding these diagnoses, it never would have happened. And I think it's so important to realize that doctors are very clever people, but they're also human beings, and there are different sorts of human beings in every walk of life, and it doesn't mean that you just have to listen to that one.
Right. And there's such an emotional toll when it comes to being misunderstood or being the medical mystery, as we call it, of feeling defeated and feeling like I'm imagining this. I'm being I'm just being a wimp, I'm imagining all of this. And so I'm interested to know like how you handled all of that.
Yeah, I think, no, you're right. When somebody's saying those words to you, it diminishes what you're feeling, and you're looking for that acknowledgement and validation. And suddenly someone's almost like, disregarding it or saying it's not as bad as it is. Or as you say, it's kind of this all in your head scenario, which I think is starting to become more spoken about online and in the patient community, particularly in relation to women, which is something that I'm hearing and seeing again and again, that there seems to be this attitude. And I also would like to know, if this is something that doctors have said to you, but that when they can't find a physical label or diagnosis to understand your symptoms, there seems to then be a shift to, oh, well, it must all be in your head then, rather than saying, which I think in the patients I've spoken to, and I certainly would rather hear this, look, Tilly, we know you're really poorly. We know you've got these awful symptoms you're having to deal with. We're really sorry that at this moment in time, we haven't managed to work out what it is. But in the meantime, we will try and support you with X, Y, Z. And I don't know about you, but I never blame anyone for not having the answer, because I don't believe you can. But I do blame them for the way that they then speak to you, or the way they turn on you, or the way that they start saying, this must be psychological. And my sort of biggest example of that probably was when I was on this London hospital admission in 2022. I was on the open ward of AMU for almost 3 months. And I got to, day one, I had doctors coming to my bedside crying because I was having these sort of seizure-like convulsions that were ravaging my body. They were horrendous. And they were saying to me, we're going to solve this. We're going to do so many tests. We've got all these ideas. And they were completely on board. And the way they spoke to me was lovely, respectful, engaged. And we went from them crying at the bedside to day 60, a doctor arriving and suddenly describing my perceived inability to walk, my perceived abdominal swelling, my perceived head pain. And to go back to the photographs, and in terms of a tip for people out there, my response to this in this moment was, how can this be perceived when it is so overtly visible? I'm saying my abdomen is in pain and I look 9 months pregnant. I'm telling you my head feels like it's about to explode and it's got lumps and swellings all over it. I'm saying that my skin hurts and I've got a rash all the way up my feet and my legs, which was disgusting. I've got, like, how can that be in my head? And but the logic of that seemed to sort of go out the window. It was an easy option, and they then sent in a psychiatrist. And it's just a story that I keep hearing. I met so many young women in Germany who, because this EDS and the vascular compressions particularly affects young women, and they were flying over to Germany because, again, they couldn't get this life-saving medical care in their own countries. And they were coming from the US, Australia, New Zealand, Iran, all over the world. And they were arriving often with their mums. And there were girls who were self-catheterizing up to 30 times a day and being told that they were choosing not to urinate. And how can you choose not to urinate? That's just, you can't even do that. That's impossible. Other girls who were told they had eating disorders when they were saying they couldn't they couldn't eat because if they ate, they vomited. And it turned out they had mouths, which was a compression that literally meant that when the food went down, it came back up again. They couldn't physically digest their food. So, and I met these mums and these daughters, and on the kind of medical gaslighting point, it wasn't only the patient themselves who were being diminished, it was the mums. And it really struck a chord with me because in my book, I use the sort of scenes to show how often the doctors very patronizingly referred to my mum as mum. So, okay, mum, yeah, you sit there and we're talking to Tilly now. Or, okay, mum, yeah, we'll look at your research later. And it really exposed to me that this isn't obviously something that's just happening in the UK from these conversations, and that we're in this sort of global healthcare system that doesn't want to listen to mum. And a lot of the time, sadly, when you don't have a label, particularly for women, doesn't seem to want to listen to women. So, and women's pain seems to be being massively, diminished. So I think, it's something that's widespread, and I'm really passionate now about changing that because it's a pattern that I keep seeing.
I wonder if doctors, like if they've been in practice for a really long time, are just set on their ways and aren't maybe up with the new things that have gone on with the disease. I see that sometimes. I went from an older doctor, he retired, to a younger one, and I've kind of seen that difference. But also, I mean, with respect to doctors and all of the schooling and work that they do, it's just, it's almost like they don't want to be told how to do their job. And the one thing that I always say is, I understand you have expertise in this, in this, but I'm the expert of my body, and my body is doing this, and it's not right, and I don't feel well. And as a tip to those out there, I always seem to say, I used to be able to load the dishwasher without any problems. Now I unload it, I take a break. I then load it back up, I take another break. And that's how I have to do things, and really kind of focusing in on the things that, how physically things have changed for you, and be able to see this is my new day to day. Is I cannot get up and clean my kitchen in one trip. It's and really being able to try and get them to understand the daily life that you have right now compared to what you had maybe a year ago, so that they can see the impact.
I think that's a really, really valuable point, and links almost to what I was saying about showing, like you're using examples rather than just saying, I can't do as much now. You're giving a very tangible example of how your life is different. And it's back to the thing that a lot of chronic illness patients say, they don't shower, which to somebody who's healthy sounds like why wouldn't you shower? But showering becomes like running a marathon, which is exactly what you're saying with doing a daily task. No, I think that's a really, really important point in terms of, a way of getting across just how bad things are. And sometimes I've been in appointments where I thought I've got it across, but I don't know if you find this, but when you've lived with something for so long, the language you use to describe it, it's become normal for you. So you don't, I sometimes hear sort of a healthy person who's maybe had just like a little blip, and the way they talk about it, I couldn't get out of bed, I couldn't move, I was drenched in sweat, I've never felt so ill in my life, that I end up almost massively underplaying it rather than dramatizing it. And sometimes my mum says to me, she's like, that was our window to like tell them how bad it is. And like, you're there smiling, telling them this like story that just sounds like you're kind of fine. And I was like, oh, really? And I don't realize I'm doing it because it's just how I talk about it. But I was with a doctor recently, and he then turned around and said to me, oh, so how much exercise do you do a day now? And I looked at him and I thought, I've come to you because I'm bedbound again, exercise. But my mum said, she was like, you haven't got across how bad it is. Because if he's asking that question, and you're right, it's about really honing in on those, I think, particular specific examples to really illustrate it is, massively important.
Yeah. I hate that question. How much are you exercising? Because I'm like, I get out of breath walking and, walking into the kitchen and getting myself a drink. I'm out of breath doing that. So as far as exercising, like, what am I supposed to do?
No, you're right. Yeah. But I think as you say, with respect to the doctors, they're only seeing you for that tiny window. So they've got the appointment. And in the UK, we have a ward round where they go around when you're an inpatient, and you literally get 5 minutes of a morning to tell them sort of everything you need to tell them, ask them everything you need to ask them. And I guess that's where the kind of advocate or family member comes in. They are seeing you in many cases 24/7. And you are living in your body 24/7. So whilst the doctors, as you say, are the expert in the medicine, you are the expert patient in your condition. And that's something that, in a polite way, is important to get across.
Yeah. I feel like you and I could probably spend all day just talking and everything. But I do,
world that we're in.
Yes. But I do want to get to the fact that your book, Be Patient, which, like I said earlier, was released last year, came out on paperback on January 29th. Tell us about your book for anybody who hasn't read it. Honestly, it's an amazing book of like courage and strength and that will of not giving up. And it's great for anybody with any chronic disease. You don't have to be struggling with the same things that you did. It's just one of the most amazing books I've ever read. Tell us about it and where they can get it.
Well, that's really lovely feedback. Thank you. And yeah, Be Patient is my 20 years behind the hospital curtain. And it takes you through lots of the topics we've discussed today. So fighting for a diagnosis is a massive part of it, and living with chronic illness. And the feedback, which has been really great from the chronic illness community, is that it has allowed them to be seen. It's really representing patient life, but every aspect of it and every aspect of our healthcare system. And it's giving the human side of the system. And you'll meet my team, who are my team Tilly, as I call them, who are my fantastic family, who are characters in it. You'll meet my friends, but you'll also meet the healthcare professionals working within this system, but all the different ones, from cleaners to physios to receptionists to doctors, nurses. It really does cover every aspect of the patient experience. And the feedback has also been that it's a memoir, but it reads like a novel. So it really is a story and a narrative that is taking you through this medical mystery. And each chapter has patient survival tips at the end, which I really hope will help people on their own journey, or anyone trying to support a patient on their journey. And it was very excitingly, it was launched in April, and we had a big book launch at Daunt Marylebone, which is a shop that I used to sometimes pop into years before when I was going to medical appointments in London. So to see my own book there on the shelves and have a very exciting launch, that was, a pinch myself moment. The book has had a fantastic reception. It's featured in lots of press. The Times, in order to give you sort of an overview and a comparison, have said that it's an antidote to Adam Kay's This Is Going to Hurt, the other side of Britain's hospital wards. And to those of you who don't know, Adam Kay was a junior doctor who wrote a very successful book about his experience of being a doctor. And I actually read this book when I was in hospital. It gave me the inspiration for Be Patient, because I read it thinking there has to be a patient reply to this. Adam Kay said it was going to hurt, and my book says it did hurt. It hurt a lot. That was my response. So it's had some great press coverage. We had a national billboard campaign after the launch in the UK, which was, again, very surreal. And it felt like finally all of the horrifying, terrible experiences that I'd had over the years were being put into something positive and a vehicle for change. And ultimately, that is my aim with Be Patient. It is my mission to use the contents of this book and my platforms at that Tilly Rose to impact change in our system. So I'm now working, as you said at the beginning, Rachel, with the NHS Confederation, global medical organisations, charities, lots of the charities who helped me along the way, like Addison's UK, EDS UK, EDS International, Rare Disease. I am collaborating with to try and amplify the patient voice. And I very strongly feel that there are so many instances where there are decisions made about the patient in a policy-making, decision-making setting, but I feel that the patients need to be in the center of these conversations, part of that decision-making. It's a bit of a sort of a running joke in the UK when it comes to things like Ofsted for schools, that the school suddenly prepares and everything's ready for their arrival. And I've seen the same happen in hospitals where a politician's arriving on the ward and you see the ward and you think, it's not normally like that. So I would really like to invite some of these people for, as I say, a patient sleepover with me to really see what goes on our wards, and hopefully Be Patient in a way exposes that. But it also celebrates the good people and the people who made a difference along my journey. And there were instances where the smallest act of kindness ended up being the thing that I remembered. And when I came to writing the book, they were the moments that I could really visualize and that had a massive impact on me. And I think it's important for people to know that when you're in these really tough situations, you do remember the people who go that little extra mile to offer that act of kindness. And I say it's not always the big medical breakthroughs necessarily that are just the most important part of the journey. It's all these little things along the way, and Be Patient celebrates that as well. So I say it's a book for everyone, because whilst it's showing an extreme medical situation, and I can't deny mine has been extreme, I say we will all be patients at some point in our lives. So this book really is relevant to everyone. And it's available on Amazon, Waterstones, UK retailers, but it's available for the international market at Blackwell's, who offer free international shipping included in the book price. So lots of my followers order through Blackwell's from the US. And as you say, the paperback is out now. The big aim with the paperback is to spread the patient voice to the masses. So we've got lots of exciting press opportunities to keep getting the patient voice out there, which I am determined to do. And today is another opportunity to do that. So thank you, Rachel.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. And I know with your official launch, you were still kind of not feeling really well. And so I hope that this release, you are feeling great and can enjoy it a little bit more. I want to tell you, when looking at somebody to co-host with me, I'm right now looking at the Spoonies that have been on the show, because people can relate to them, go back and follow their story and everything. But you were top of my list just because I really appreciate how warm you are and how kind you are, and your advocacy and the ability to be able to spread the word of chronic illness and all of the things that Be Patient does. And I can't thank you enough for taking time out. I know you are so busy, and so
no, thank you. No, not at all. You don't need to thank me. I'm delighted to chat to you, and equally right back at you. It's been, as you say, I could have chatted all day about this, because I think we both feel so passionately about it, and it's a world that we're immersed in. And I think in terms of, it's very, very lovely feedback, but exactly the same right back at you, because I find that when I talk to patients who have experienced these different, horror shows, I guess, as I call them, along the way, and have been forced into this life, I find that they are often the warmest, smiliest, sort of happiest people in the room, because when they get, I often say, a little break where the universe just gives them a chance to, do something like this, you're just so grateful for those moments. And you would often never realize what they were having to deal with and the struggles that were going on behind the surface. So yeah, I think that's a really important message. And what you're doing on here is so valuable to so many patients. And I think it's that sense of acknowledgement, which I personally don't feel patients really get. I think they're a group in society that haven't fully been acknowledged, particularly chronic illness patients, for what they are having to deal with daily and the things that people don't really see. So to be able to chat about those on a podcast like this is fantastic. So I'm delighted that you're keeping it going this year. And it's been great to record the first episode with you.
Yes. I'm so excited to get this out. So I just can't thank you enough. And thank you for all the great tips that you gave to our listeners. And just means so much. You're going to get me emotional. It means so much for you to come on here. So thank you.
Well, no, it's been a really great conversation and I very much appreciate it. So yeah, I say I'll finish by saying a line in the book, which is the symbol I use as the dandelions. And I say, dandelions don't just grow in lush green fields, but in the cracks between the pavements. And they remind me of so many patients that I have met along the way, because so many of these patients are trying to bloom and thrive in such difficult conditions and circumstances. And yeah, I'm sending out to the listeners and to you, Rachel, that dandelion energy now.
Oh, I love it. I love it. If there's two things that I ask for you to do today, number one is an easy one and it's free. You must follow Tilly Rose on Instagram at @TillyRose and join her community where she talks in chapters about her life, and it's continuing on even past her writing of this book. And number two, please go and find Tilly's book. It is amazing and it resonates for anyone dealing with any sort of chronic illness. So as we wrap up today's conversation, I just want to pause for a moment and just acknowledge how heavy this topic can be. Talking about being a medical mystery, about not being believed and not having answers and just carrying the weight of the uncertainty isn't easy. So if there's one thing that you take away from the episode, it's this: your experience is real. Even if you don't have a diagnosis, it's real. Even if the system hasn't caught up with your body, even if you're still waiting, it's real. I want to thank Tilly for sharing her story so openly and using her voice to pull back the curtain on the healthcare system and being such a great advocate for change. And to everyone listening, whether you're diagnosed, undiagnosed, or somewhere in between, you're not alone in this. We'll continue having these conversations this season because chronic illness stories matter and they deserve space. Thank you for spending time with me today. If something from this episode stayed with you, I hope you carry it gently. You don't have to have everything figured out. Until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening to The SpoonFull Show. Follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. Leave a rating, review, and comment. Connect with me on Instagram at spoonfulofstrength and TikTok at spoonful.of.strength. Remember, that's spoonful with 2 L's. Shop customized t-shirts, sweatshirts, hoodies, mugs, and more on our Etsy shop at spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com and use code podcast for 20% off your entire cart.